All right, we are broadcasting live. This is a special report of a more perfect union along with AURN. And we are delighted to have the president of the Washington Association of Black Journalists and Huffington Post uh, political journalist Phil Lewis with us today. This morning, we were shaken and stirred by news that independent journalist, former CNN anchor Don Lemon had been arrested by the U.S. Department of Justice, along with Georgia Ford, also an independent journalist and producer. Saw some pretty chilling video of ICE agents literally knocking on the door of Georgia Ford's home. Phil, I know we only have you for a little bit, but tell us, what is the latest that you're hearing?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. I'm hearing from other journalists. As you know, I represent the Washington Association of Black Journalists, and so people have been reaching out to me saying, about how chilling this moment is, right? Like this moment in time. For Ford's part, Georgia Ford is actually the vice president of the NABJ chapter in Minnesota, right? And the video that was shared, you can see it on my social media. You can see the agents knocking at the door and the agent peeking through the window. It's very chilling. It's a chilling moment for free speech, for those of us who believe in the First Amendment, right? So Ford, right now, I believe she's still in custody. I believe I was speaking with her attorney her publicist earlier. So right now we're just trying to figure out what's going on.
I want to bring you in, Ebony McMorris, White House correspondent for AURN. This is my buddy right here, also in the trenches. What are you hearing in Washington right now, particularly on the DOJ side of the House? We know that all of this is happening on the same day that the Department of Justice just made a major release in the Epstein case.
Let's just say this was to be expected. We heard from Pam Bondi, we heard from Harmet Dillon saying that after the protests took place in that church last week, that they weren't going to stand for it, that they were going to go after it. Now, we saw a judge dismiss this earlier, but now we have federal agents arresting Don Lemon and also Georgia Ford, along with two other, I need to confirm this, along with two other activists as well. They have been on a manhunt for anyone that does not align themselves with the agenda of this administration. And I'll just say this: as I was hearing and reading all the stories, I'm reminded of, remember when Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, we had the hearings before the Supreme Court, and she called in a 5-alarm fire, and this is it. And I just want for people to really understand that this is, especially when it comes to the First Amendment for freedom movements, because when we look at the charges, if the government can call this a KKK style conspiracy, and if documenting a protest is what Lemon was doing and what Georgia was doing, is treated in the same type of fashion that the Klan burning a cross is, then the question is not just what can they do to Don Lemon, what can they do to Georgia, but what can they do to any of us who dare to tell the truth in as we stare down state-sanctioned violence. That's why we're also talking about the murder of Renee Good and also of Alex Preddy. And so he is always attacked. This administration attacking journalists is not new, but we have not seen this where they are going door to door and they're knocking on journalists and they're arresting people. Don't forget the Washington Post writer who also, she wasn't arrested, but they confiscated her computer and other things, trying to figure out where she was getting sources from. So I'm just going to say, expect more of this.
And that is chilling unto itself. It's chilling that we should expect more of this. Phil Lewis, president of the Washington Association of Black Journalists and political reporter for Huffington Post. For folks who are less familiar, talk to people about the kind of rigorous training that journalists have when it comes to upholding our end of the bargain when it comes to asserting the freedom of the press. Talk to people who may not be familiar with certain protocols that would lead someone to make sure that there is no question they were asserting their First Amendment right as a journalist in situations like the one we saw in Minneapolis.
Yeah, and so I think that what I think is really important for people to understand is that Don Lemon was exercising his First Amendment right as a journalist and to cover what was happening inside of the church at that time in January. At that time was really it's critical. Uh, Don Lemon in the video said like, look, this all I was doing was reporting on it. I was speaking with he. If you watch the video, he actually spoke with the pastor and members of the church. That's journalism. That is what we're taught to do, and it's really scary that Trump and his cronies are going after journalists for activities protected by the First Amendment. And so we go to school for this. We get training from this. We this is what we do, and we won't stop. This is the type of work that we do and that we're called to do.
Uh-oh, we can't hear you, Nee. You're muted.
And on the point of not stopping, Phil, there are a number of folks who are wondering what message journalists and content creators should glean from this action by the U.S. Department of Justice. It is no coincidence that this is also happening on a national day of protest. What's your message out there to folks who may not have been trained in journalism, but content creators that are have a tendency to put out content that is political in nature? What's your message out there to them?
My message is that we need to come together, right? And what WABJ has been trying to do, and at least in my presidency, is that we've been calling in content creators, we've been calling in news influencers, we've been calling in all sorts of figures who are in the media ecosystem, and trying to provide people with training, trying to help them understand here's what journalism is, here's what we do, and to not be afraid of situations like this because we'll be here to support you, and to make sure that they know their rights. Last year, we provided a training when the National Guard took over um, cities in the country. We provided training uh, to help journalists better understand their rights when uh, the National Guard comes to town, or when ICE comes to town. So we try to provide those sorts of trainings for journalists who may have done this for years, but also for entry level journalists and people who have no formal training in journalism as well.
Thank you for that, Phil, and thank you for the work that you lead with the Washington Association of Black Journalists and the reporting that you do for the Huffington Post. We know Phil Lewis sent it. You can trust and verify that the information is good. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Ebony, I know that you have a statement. You have a statement from Georgia
Yeah.
Fort's team. Can you share that with us?
Sure. And I've been kind of going back and forth this morning. Actually, I was scheduled to interview her. So when I saw this news this morning, I was just so alarmed. And it says Georgia Fort, Emmy award winning independent journalist and NABJ Minnesota vice president, was arrested early today, January 30th, in connection with her news reporting on the anti-ICE demonstration at a St. Paul church service on January the 18th. She is scheduled for an initial appearance at 1:30 p.m. today in federal court in Minneapolis. We expect her to be released. Fort was present at the demonstration solely in a journalistic capacity, documenting an event of significant public interest and concern. The free speech and free press guarantees of the First Amendment fully protect such news gathering and reporting activities, and Fort's arrest is a transparent and unconstitutional attempt by our federal government to intimidate journalists and chill their protected speech. She will be vigorously defending herself against these charges.
I mean, this is not only major news, this is also personal. This is not an intellectual exercise, but this is part of the work that we do each and every day. You as a White House correspondent for AURN, me as a White House correspondent for KBLA. If we can get a little personal for a moment, Ebony, talk to us about whether or not these recent events is causing you to think about your reporting any differently than you did a day ago. Is it causing you to think about some of the work that you do on the ground, your protection of sources? Is this causing you to think about your work differently in any way?
I would say it is. With each incident that we hear, it makes you go 10 toes deeper. With me personally, I'm in the White House, in the Oval, have been attacked by the president already. But my concern and my focus is number one to tell the news and report the news as it happens, but also more importantly to show the community, show the world how it is affecting everybody at home, how these orders are affecting everyday Americans, and also to uplift the voices of those who are unheard. Right, we sit in special seats and up close to it, and we understand the dangers. Just to be honest, Nee, I know you and I know so many other journalists have had to talk to their newsrooms about how to report, because let's be honest, we've had journalists that have been fired. We've had the president sue news networks. We've had people left and right sit down or be scared to speak up because they're afraid of the dollars that could be lost if they do so. We've had people who said things on their personal social media pages that have come back and MAGA has targeted them. I'll just say, if you go to Georgia Fort's Instagram page, she actually had just reported on a story where there was one of the MAGA protesters who ended up being pardoned after the January 7th riot onto the Capitol. Literally went to a journalist's apartment, stood outside the apartment, said that journalist's name, and basically said that we're coming for you. So not only do you have an administration that is ramping up this rhetoric, that is targeting people, but has also emboldened his base to go after people. And they can say all day that they haven't, but I'd like to see what happened to that gentleman who actually posted that video. And then we saw Georgia Ford reporting on that video. But let's look to see who was halted off in handcuffs. Where is Kyle Rittenhouse? We could go down the list of people, right, who have targeted those who have been speaking up and telling the truth, and a lot of times, like Kyle, they get pardoned. Not only do they get pardoned, but they get platformed, and they have been given a stage. And we've also seen that millions in donations come to them. That is why it is important for us to platform each other, to continue to speak out, and also to tell the truth in these spaces, even when it's hard, even when violence sometimes is threatened. But it's important for us all to have each other's back in this.
It is very important for us all to have each other's back. And for folks that are just joining us, this is a special report of More Perfect Union. We're typically, not on air on Fridays. Fridays is my off day, but duty calls at 4:30 this morning. I was awakened here in Los Angeles to my cell phone. The cell phone was just going off with friends and activists and colleagues from across the country that were absolutely disturbed, absolutely shaken and stirred after having heard that former CNN anchor and independent journalist Don Lemon was arrested by the U.S. Department of Justice. And he wasn't alone. There's video now that is public. I saw it this morning when it was still private. Of Georgia Fort, another independent journalist and producer. And as Phil Lewis, the president of the Washington Association of Black Journalists, just mentioned, someone who used to serve as president of a local NABJ chapter in Minnesota. That's who Georgia Fort is. And guess what happened? She got the knock at the door. She got the knock at the door this morning by our federal government. Federal agents
It's
were knocking at her door
yeah.
this morning.
Hmm.
And I can't
It
tell you
was
how disturbed people are about it.
it was chilling for those who have not seen that video to hear a child in the background screaming. As you watch that video and hear Georgia um, say what's happening, I wish I had the transcript in front of me, but talk about um, her right. She feels like her right, her First Amendment right, has been violated for doing uh what it protects, what it is supposed to protect. She was not there protesting. She was there covering the protests. So what does that now mean? I do know, when we were talking about going live, you were telling me some of the actions that's going to take place today, if it has not already, with the ministers in Minnesota that are also gathering. I think you froze up on me. Let's see what's happening. But I do want to read a statement while we are waiting for Needs to get back online. A statement that came in from, let me find it right now, from, I believe it was Lemon's team earlier today, in which he said, let me pull up the statement now. This is from Abby Lowell, who's representing Don Lemon, who's his attorney. And I'm going to read the statement now. It just keeps disappearing from my phone. Let's see if I can get this statement up. The statement says Don Lemon was taken into custody by federal agents last night in Los Angeles, where he was covering the Grammy Awards. Don has been a journalist for there. We got you back for. I'm just reading the statement from Don's attorney.
Mhm.
Where Don has been a journalist for 30 years, and his constitutionally protected work in Minneapolis was no different than what he has always done. The First Amendment exists to protect journalists whose role it is to shine a light on the truth and hold those in power accountable. There is no more important time for people like Don to be doing this work. Instead of investigating the federal agents who killed two peaceful Minnesota protesters, the Trump Justice Department is devoting its time, attention, and resources to this arrest. And that is real that is the real indictment of wrongdoing in this case. This unprecedented attack on the First Amendment and transparent attempt to distract attention from the many crises facing the administration will not stand. Don will fight these charges vigorously and thoroughly in court.
I mean, and this is the deal. We cannot allow Don Lemon to fight this alone. We cannot allow Georgia Fort to fight this alone. Their fight is our fight. Their fight is our fight. There should be no daylight between these fights. There are lots of moving parts to this story. For people who are just joining us, this is a special report of A More Perfect Union in collaboration with AURN. And there are a number of other friends and colleagues that will join us in real time. I just figured instead of us trading text messages and trading phone calls, that we could do a public good, a public service by sharing these conversations, sharing the information that we're learning in real time, which with each and every one of you, all of our leaders, learners, and listeners out there. I'm so happy that White House correspondent for AURN, Ebony McMorris, made time to hop on and be a part of this. There are other friends that will be joining us. But Ebony, you want to catch people up as to what has transpired so far this morning for people just joining us.
No, absolutely. We're talking about the arrest this morning. I think all of us have been watching it. The arrest of, I believe it's four, but we do know Don Lemon, independent journalist Don Lemon, and independent journalist Georgia Fort, who were taken into custody this morning by a grand jury awarded that. And so, I mean, the charges that we're hearing about, I'm sorry, I'm looking to the side as people text to see where they're going to be able to join us. I know we're going to have some legal representation later, but the charges that it looks like they may be facing is the FACE Act and the KKK Act. And I just from a little bit of research wanted to break down a little bit. The FACE Act was written to stop violent extremists from bombing clinics or terrorizing worshipers. was not for criminalizing journalists and filming non-violent protests that didn't result in any type of destruction or property or anyone. The second is the enforcement of the 1871 KKK Act. They had to dust that off and figure that this is what that they would lead with. This was designed to crush the KKK. Their terror campaigns against black voters, against black office holders and their white allies. It was organized by lynch mobs, night riders, and political assassins. And I would beg to say we are in a time where this feels like a lynch mob than what we're seeing here. And now to invoke those same anti-Klan conspiracy logs against journalists, those who are actually lifting up their voices, is criminal. And also local activists, people protesting the killing of Renee Good and Alex Preddy by federal agents. It is almost an inversion of what the law was for. And so a federal magistrate had already looked at DOJ's first attempt to charge Don Lemon over the church protests and said there was no probable cause. That's what they said. No
That's
probable
right.
cause.
That's
And
right.
that standard news gathering is not criminal conspiracy. But instead of reevaluating the administration, then came back with more extreme tools, the FACE Act and this KKK Act. They had to go back to slavery, hunting for any statute that could turn filming this protest into any type of criminal act or conspiracy to violate civil rights. Meanwhile, people are actually using state power and guns on residents. And I want to point this out, me, because with all of this, let's not forget what this is about. This is about the election. This is about the vote. We just saw what happened in Fulton County, Georgia. We just saw that when it came to these protests that's happening in Minneapolis, Pam Bondi wrote a letter saying that they would even pull back. I didn't believe it. Pull back some of the forces, pull back if they would turn over their voter rolls. If you're out here trying to arrest people because you want to get the worst of the worst, why is it that you'll pull back if you get a hold of people's voter rolls?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's about, because the world is watching and they're not going to put up with it. And so I need people to understand that even as we discuss what happened, even as we talk about our outrage, I don't want people to leave here feeling powerless. There's some important decisions that you can make with your vote. There's some important decisions that you can make if you want to decide to stand up in your own community. And it's not easy. We're not saying that it is easy at all, but it is necessary because we are in the midst of a president who has said, well, what's wrong with the dictator? Who praises dictators? Who wants to be a dictator himself, and who has overrun and tried to go through and overturn everything that has come against this administration.
It is a chilling moment. It's a chilling moment right now for our country. It's a chilling moment for all lovers of the First Amendment, those of us that enjoy the First Amendment. And, that's free speech, that's protected speech. And particularly for Black journalists, who seem to be the subject of these really brutal tactics that we're
Heinous,
seeing employed
criminal,
by the
racist.
Department of Justice. And look, one of the questions I had this morning, I did an interview on WVON, the Cleopatra Show in Chicago. And one of the questions that she had that we didn't have a chance to flush out as much, but she asked, what is it like in this moment being a White House correspondent, being a Black White House correspondent, covering an administration that thinks that actions like this are okay, doing our duty, and doing it with integrity, doing it with all due diligence. What has it been like for you covering this White House, all things considered?
It's hard to even put into words, but I'm just going to say this, and I always have to check myself because Project 2025 laid it all out, whether people wanted to believe it or not. It laid it all out. And so there was a preparation process that we all had to go through, knowing that this was going to happen. As a White House journalist, we're going in. I'm not going to lie. The day that I had yelled out and got called all types of names, it wasn't new. He had done it to so many others. But I thank God I got the support from people like you and Phil Lewis, who called immediately, and others who had been through that, to say, no, let me tell you how to begin to protect yourself, because that's real, right? Let me begin to tell you some things that you need to do. I had that, but not everybody else has that when they're speaking out. These were independent journalists that don't have the protection sometimes of larger networks. Like, let's be real about how money flows in this industry. It's not always that easy. And so for me, it's making me go and dig deeper into some of the stories. On Wednesdays, I do White House Wednesdays and WHUR, and we're very candid about what's happening in this administration, but not just talking about it. I think people are looking for information on what to do in this. We just brought on someone that's an immigration attorney that was giving us the real on stuff that's happening in the community that we may not even be seeing, and also directing our audience toward stand with Minnesota, where people are looking for money for rent, that who have been protesting, right? Who's have been separated from their children, who are without resources, people scared to come out of their house, because they're scared of being arrested, detained, flown to some other country, not having communication with their attorneys, not having communication with their children. But yet, and let's talk about, we in the middle of a deep freeze. If that community that does not have any support can come out like that and raise up their voice, then what does it say about all of us who report? Because it's really about them. Because here's why, I mean, you know this, it's not stopping in Minnesota. You saw what happened when they came to LA. I'm in Washington, D.C. I saw what happened here. We know about how he's gunning for Baltimore and Chicago, how he's going for cities that are Black run, that are Democratic, that are Black run. And so it's incumbent upon all of us, from journalists to independent reporters to everyday citizens. I'm encouraging everybody to be your own town crier, to get in community.
That's right. That's right. Well, we're now joined, speaking of community, I want to work into the show, Dr. Jonathan E. Collins. He's a professor of political science over at Columbia University. He's a democracy scholar, he's a resident democracy scholar here on A More Perfect Union. This is a special report. We have gone live as there is some deeply disturbing breaking news. That news is that former CNN anchor and independent journalist Don Lemon, along with independent journalist, producer, former NABJ chapter president Georgia Fort, have been arrested by the Department of Justice. This is a gross injustice, and here to help us separate the fact from the fiction and understand the politics that are at play here and how much of an escalation this is in the Trump agenda. Dr. Jonathan Collins, welcome.
Dr. Nee, thank you for having me and for such an important conversation. I think we're all still processing this in real time. This is unprecedented. This is crazy.
It is. And so, Dr. Collins, we're also joined with AURN White House correspondent Ebony McMorris. We've been talking to a number of folks out there that are experts in this work. And as a service to our listeners and the folks that are streaming, we want folks to have some concrete takeaways from what is happening. We know this is also a national day of protest. What is your message to the folks out there that, their first mind isn't to show up at a protest, to go pick up a picket sign? Their first mind is not to boycott anything, but you and I both know that those folks make up a bit of a silent majority in this country. What is your message to them in light of this deeply disturbing news?
I think they should be incredibly inspired and see this as a very critical tipping point. So this is not the first time in American history, or really modern American history, where we've seen a journalist under attack and essentially arrested, jailed, even beaten or detained. There's actually unfortunate consistent history of this. It goes back to the Vietnam War, where there were a number of journalists who were jailed for covering essentially Richard Nixon's cover-up of the information that led to the Watergate scandal, and also covering the anti-war protests that were emerging in response to the American dissatisfaction with the Vietnam War. You go to 9/11. There were a number of journalists, including Judy Miller from the New York Times, who was arrested by the Bush administration's Department of Justice for engaging in essentially like journalistic coverage of this, of the sort of anti-war protests. Republican National Convention. We've seen journalists arrested covering Occupy Wall Street, and of course, the Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd. And so, one thing that we notice about every one of those instances that I just named, the protests led to some sort of seismic policy change, right? Like every time we've seen journalists jailed for covering anti-movements aimed at administrations, guess what those movements they do? They succeed. So if you're seeing what's happening right now, you should feel incredibly inspired because hey, we've seen this movie before, and guess what happens in that movie? The good guys win.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, try telling that to this Department of Justice. They certainly seem hell bent on trying to make sure that we lose and we lose big. Ebony McMorris, you've been tracking this story from Washington, D.C. All morning while I've been here in Los Angeles. To the folks who are streaming us right now, Dr. Jonathan E. Collins is joining us from New York City, where instead of just hopping on a group chat or picking up the phone, we thought it made sense to share with each and every one of you in real time what is really going on. Ebony, do you have any updates to share with our audience?
Yeah, I literally, as you were talking, I'm not at the White House today. I'm not pulled today. I'm pulled next week. And the president was in the Oval Office. I believe it just ended. And I was going through the transcript to see if any reporters asked him about Minneapolis, what his reaction is. So I'm just going through the audio transcript, and it looks like one of the reporters asked him, he of course called someone fake news, someone ABC fake news, and they asked him why he was suing the IRS and all these other things. He yelled out fake news. Don't forget, all this is a distraction. But he did get to Minneapolis. Someone said, Mr. President, on Minneapolis, Governor Tim Walz recently likened the conflict on the ground to Fort Sumter. Sort of imply that this is the beginning of the Civil War. And I do want to end up going back to that. Do you agree with that characterization? What's brewing in Minneapolis? And he said, basically, I was elected as the law and order president. I was elected on strong borders. We had a border. You know the script. 25 million people to come. Many were murderers and murdering people. 11,888. Then he goes on to talk about Venezuela. Then he goes on to talk about Congo. And then he said that talking about how they dump prisoners. It's the same script, honestly, as I'm going through this. And then, of course, he goes to the economy, which he doesn't think affordability is a real word. Then he talks about inflation. And then I'm going through looking at how he's lying about the numbers, how he inherited a mess. He said the media is always correcting him. I don't know. It's a mess. He goes on literally to talk about the lowest murder rates in DC. I don't even want to go through this mumbo jumbo that I'm reading on here from this transcript, but it is all a distraction.
It's all a massive distraction. And Dr. Jonathan Collins, what do you make of the fact that all of this is happening, considering everything that Ebony McMorris sort of just shared from the White House pool report? For folks who are less familiar, the White House pool is sort of the group of journalists that follow the president closely, his every movement day to day. I've had pool duty. Ebony McMorris does pool duty. And so those folks that you see in the Oval Office that are questioning the president or at cabinet meetings or wherever he is, they're part of the White House pool. You just heard the pool notes from today to give you a sense of what's in the stream of consciousness for this president. But Dr. Collins, in light of what you just heard from Ebony McMorris, and in light of the fact that the Department of Justice just released millions of pages of the Epstein files, what do you make of these deeply disturbing events? I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Do you?
I don't. I think, and we're fortunate to have Ebony here breaking this down for us and pointing out just the level of smoke screening that's happening right now, and the misdirection that we're seeing from the White House. Even the discussions about even trying to justify, what's happening in Minnesota as something that is in any way consistent with border protection and quote unquote law and order. Remember, the whole reason why ICE is supposedly in Minnesota is to crack down on quote unquote healthcare fraud, Medicare fraud. This is nothing violent. This was this idea that folks were actually using social resources in ways that apparently were defrauding the government. Again, even with limited information that was the case. And so this is a hit job, plain and simple. And this is a president that refuses to, say, as we say in a more perfect union, the quiet part out loud, which is just that this is a strategic hit job aimed at a Democratic state. And now they are looking at ways in which they can, be dishonest about that. Like, Trump has been very clear in his actions that he is going to punish political adversaries. And so, who's the governor of Minnesota? Tim Walz, who ran against Donald Trump in the most recent presidential election. And now you look at, Don Lemon, who has been incredibly vocal against the president for not just recently with Minnesota, but pretty much since Donald Trump has ascended into the national political landscape. So again, it's the bully cracking down on anybody that has anything to say negative against the bully, except this time the bully happens to have control over the free world.
And I was just trying to search for a report that just came out that talked about how many times we have seen ICE officials either break rules. And there was a report I just pulled up that was talking at use of force. I mean, let's really look at this as far as use of force and shootings since Trump came back in office. ICE agents have opened fire repeatedly during routine operations, 17 shootings. 4 people killed, I thought it was 3, and multiple others seriously injured. And we have all seen that with each time, there is always video that contradicts this. And as much as they try to soften their words, they're not walking back their plan. So when you take a Bovino out and you send Tom Homan in, I want people to know the plan doesn't change. The face may change, but the agenda is always the same, because Tom Homan is the one who sat down and did an interview. I believe it was on MSNBC, asking about what their plans were for immigration. And he said in that interview that this will get done. Their goal was like 1 million. However often. He said by any means necessary. Well, this is what by any means necessary looks like. So I don't want people to think that he is a harmless face, right? 2025 is one of the deadliest years for ICE custody. And 2026 is starting up much of the same. Much of the same.
It is. I mean, we're not even, a full month. We're not even a full month into the new year. And already it feels like, we are on a freight train that is not slowing down. It's only accelerating. For folks who are just joining us live, this is a special report of A More Perfect Union in light of the deeply disturbing news that so many of us woke up to, some of us at 4:30 a.m. Pacific time. Reports that former CNN anchor Don Lemon has been arrested. The feds are calling him an online agitator. The LA Times reporting that Don Lemon was arrested right here in Los Angeles, according to his attorney. Three others, including another journalist, that would be Georgia Fort, was also arrested on charges that they violated federal law during a protest last week at a church in St. Paul, Minnesota. Lemon was taken into custody early Friday morning, while covering the upcoming Grammy Awards. It's scheduled to happen this Sunday. It's worth noting that Don has been a journalist for 30 years. 30 years. Just take this in for a minute. Imagine honing your craft for 30 years. He ain't new to this. He true to this. Don Lemon knows what he's doing. And for the U.S. Department of Justice to call Don Lemon and Georgia Fort online agitators for live streaming a protest at a church is beyond the pale. I want to invite Isaac Wilson. He is a Democratic Party chair, former Democratic Party chair in South Carolina. He's a Democratic strategist. And I want to invite Isaac Wilson, who is a regular. He is a regular here on A More Perfect Union. I want to invite him to share with us his viewpoint on what's happening, the politics of what is taking place today. Isaac, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
So Isaac, share with us, where were you this morning when you learned of the arrest of Don Lemon and Georgia Fort?
Glad to be back with you. I'm actually at Denmark Technical College, getting a president installed here, and then learned the news that Don Lemon had been arrested. This is taking it too far when the First Amendment rights of the people who are reporting the news, when that is being taken advantage of, and you're arresting them for simply doing their job as a reporter. Don Lemon has been in this game, oh my God, 30 plus years, and is respected throughout the industry. Even people that are not in the industry, we still respect Don Lemon for what he does. And I think the Trump administration and ICE, they're just taking it too far. And this has to be honed in before someone seriously gets hurt. And you're going to go into the wrong, I keep saying this, you're going to go into the wrong neighborhood, and it won't be as pretty. You're going to go into the wrong neighborhood, and it's going to be people getting hurt, because they're going to start to feel like they're really not agents of the government. They're really thugs behind masks and badges, and people are going to start retaliating against them. But this right here is just, this is beneath the presidency of the United States.
What are you hearing? What are you hearing on the ground from folks in South Carolina? I know the South Carolina delegation is very close. Have you heard anything coming out of the office of Representative Jim Clyburn? Are you hearing anything from that South Carolina delegation on either the Democratic side or the Republican side? Because we know in recent weeks, Republicans' displeasure with this president, particularly when it comes to tactics employed by ICE, they've been a bit more vocal than they normally are. What are you hearing from the South Carolina delegation?
The delegation is right now trying to draft something to send out, and Clyburn is our leader, so we're waiting to see what he drafts and see what he wants us to back him with. But in regards to Republicans here, Governor candidate Alan Wilson, and of course the current attorney general, is all over this, and he is on the side of the ICE agents and on the side of Donald Trump, saying that if anybody gets in the way of doing the work of the administration, that it should be dealt with accordingly. And he's in step with them with arresting Don Lemon, someone who's simply doing their job, and is a respected journalist and does his job well. So Alan Wilson and the Republicans are stepping fast to Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans.
Dr. Collins, again, the politics of this is getting real funky real quickly, and we're not seeing very many, not nearly enough profiles in courage that we need to see. What is it that you believe we need to hear today from members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, not just to bring the temperature down, but to remind people about that paper, that U.S. Constitution, the oath that all of them have taken to protect us against enemies, both foreign and domestic? What is it that members of Congress need to do to hit the reset button quick, fast, and in a hurry?
Well, I think they have to remind people that the Constitution is not just about tradition, right? I think we've been talking about the erosion of democratic norms and violation of constitutional principles as if it's just about, simply breaking a rule. This is not just about breaking rules or breaking precedent. The principles of the Constitution have a very important logic, right? Freedom of speech must be protected in order to avoid going down into authoritarianism, right? If individual people can express discontent with government, that's the major difference between living in a democracy and living under a dictatorship, where if you don't agree with and support what the leader says, in some violent dictatorships, you can be killed. And that's essentially what we're seeing right now, is that you have folks in Minnesota who are disagreeing with a move initiated by a president that has no sort of legitimacy or grounding in protecting the public safety of the American people. Again, nothing about the intervention in Minnesota is rooted in anti-violence. The ICE agents are attacking people who they claim were violating, some perception of welfare fraud. The worst version of this story is that people were nonviolent, and yet people are losing their lives, right? And so when you start to see violation of freedom of speech, when you start to see jailing, members of the press that are supposed to be the fourth branch of American government, there to ensure that there is this separation of power, check and balance on the authority of a president who could potentially go rogue. When these things break down, again, this is how democracy dies.
This is exactly how democracy dies, and it feels like democracy is on life support today. Ebony McMorris, what are you hearing in Washington at the moment?
I'm trying to go through some more of these texts that are coming through, but I'll say this, as you were talking, I was thinking about that viral post that on the 9 steps to authoritarianism, expanding the executive power, which we saw from day one in this administration, crushing accountability and independent institutions, which we see repeatedly, attacking the press and control of information, turning law enforcement into a political weapon, rewriting or selectively enforcing the law. All of this is happening at the same time, undermining courts and the rule of law, targeting vulnerable groups and scapegoats, manipulation of election and voting. That is step 8. And step 9 is normalizing permanent crisis and fear. That's the 5. That's the alarm. Which step are we not in?
Dr. Collins, I mean, you know this well. You study this very closely as a professor of political science at Columbia University, as our resident democracy scholar here on A More Perfect Union. You study, these things, these trends very closely. You study, the political history very closely. What is it that some of our fellow Americans who haven't yet taken the actions of this president, this administration, as seriously as they should? What is it that they have been missing based on some of the research that you've been conducting and studying? And what is it that we as journalists, that we as a civil society leaders need to be more explicit about when it comes to reaching folks who, in my view, make up the silent majority?
Well, I think we have to take seriously the fact that one of the centerpieces to holding this all together is trust in government. That when a people start to express widespread distrust in their government, that's when things can lead to chaos. That's when you see things like military dictatorships or military opposition groups emerge and exert violent force over its people. That's when you see the emergence of things like guerrilla warfare. That's when you see the emergence of violent leaders who are unapologetically enacting harm on opposition. That's when you see leaders emerge and exercise power to engage in unilateral control. Go to some of these countries that allow these things to happen at scale, and everything from what you can eat to how many children you can have to where you're allowed to work, all these things are dictated by leaders who only have their own political interest at heart. And it sounds hyperbolic. It sounds like, oh, we're talking about something this isn't possible, this isn't feasible, this isn't something that is knocking on the doorsteps of a country like America. And that's the thing about fairy tales. They all sound like fairy tales until they're true.
Mm-hmm. You're right, and this is sounding more like a nightmare than a fairy tale at the moment. In just a few moments, we're going to play you some video. We know that Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has recently taken to the floor of the Senate to address the arrest of Don Lemon. We're going to get that video up for you momentarily, but Ebony, updates from Washington.
Right now, I'm just seeing that the Justice Department just came out a little earlier talking about conducting an investigation into the death of Alex Petty. Actually, the New York Times is also extensively reporting on this. The announcement was made by Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Officials initially said it would be confined to a relatively narrow use of force inquiry by the Department of Homeland Security. These investigations are supposed to be taking place, they're saying, on parallel tracks. He said that he was looking at everything that would shed light onto what happened that day. We saw what happened that day. And here's the thing. Who is trusting these investigations coming out by this administration? One hand is cleaning the other hand. I don't know. I see you have it up now, but the trust is gone and really never should have been there. But we are seeing the destruction of democracy in this country. And I hope people don't get any hopes up on this investigation.
That's right. Well, we have a video right now, courtesy of C-SPAN, where, again, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is responding to the early morning arrest of former CNN anchor and independent journalist Don Lemon and Georgia Fort on the floor of the United States Senate. This is a special report of A More Perfect Union. I'm joined with Ebony McMorris, the White House correspondent for AURN, as well as Dr. Jonathan E. Collins. He's a professor of political science at Columbia University, and also our resident democracy scholar here on A More Perfect Union. Take a listen to what Senator Chuck Schumer had to say this morning.
On another issue, last night, federal agents arrested journalist Don Lemon in Los Angeles after he recently covered protest activities in Minnesota. Once again, the administration is behaving no differently from police states and authoritarian regimes across history. They've arrested a journalist for the crime of doing his job. And let's be very clear, this arrest is not just about one journalist in one incident. The arrest is a dark message to journalists everywhere. If you dare criticize this administration, watch your back. That's not a democracy. That's a police state. and that is pure authoritarian bile. Democracy will suffer if the government chokes our civil liberties. Under this administration, the Department of Justice has all too often become the Department of Vengeance. Don Lemon should be released at once and the frivolous charges against him dropped. Now on the Fed.
Yeah, and so you just heard from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, not mincing words, saying that Don Lemon and others should be released right away. Ebony, I know that it's not just Senator Schumer, but we're also hearing from leadership in the U.S. House of Representatives, leadership that's a part of the Congressional Black Caucus. You have a statement to share with us. Take it away.
This is coming from Black Caucus PAC Chairman Meeks, who said, issued a statement on behalf of the PAC. Gregory Meeks says, Donald Trump and his cowardly goons' attack on the free press will not go unanswered. Americans will rise to defend the Fourth Estate, and the Congressional Black Caucus will fiercely protect the Black press, a vital institution that has amplified the voices of marginalized and oppressed communities since its founding. We stand with Don Lemon and Georgia Fort, and we will defend their rights as journalists. I guess my question, would be, what does that look like? What does that look like?
Well, I can give you a hint of what it could look like. As we all know, the Senate Democrats, not the House Democrats, but the Senate Democrats have been negotiating with Senate Republicans over funding related to the Department of Homeland Security. We know that there are a number of appropriation bills that they did vote for, but what they essentially did, the deal that they struck yesterday, is they essentially struck a deal to kick the can down the road for another 2 weeks. For another 2 weeks to give them time to negotiate what some of the guardrails might be when it comes to the tactics employed when it comes to the ICE operation across the country. I want to remind all of our leaders, learners, and listeners that ICE is better funded than it's ever been in the history of the agency. It is one of the
largest
law enforcement agencies in the United States. And so there are Republicans that are willing to continue to give ICE a blank check to fund the terror that folks are experiencing in communities like Minneapolis, among others, the terror that independent journalists like Don Lemon and Georgia Fort have been subjected to. And so when you raise the question, well, what could they do? They could not fund them.
Right.
And Dr. Collins, please weigh in on, why the hand wringing? Why is this so hard, particularly for Senate Democrats?
Well, it's hard because, so ICE operates under the Department of Homeland Security. And, in order to, make major changes structurally to ICE, you have to go through, or at least like the policy structure and the operations of DHS. And I think they're struggling with how to disentangle the two from one another. How do we preserve the legitimacy and sanctity of the Department of Homeland Security as a whole, while essentially reining in this sub-organization, this subunit that has essentially gone rogue. We have to understand what's happening here with ICE. This is a paramilitary unit that is operating pretty much solely at the discretion of the president via the director of Homeland Security, who is potentially on trial for impeachment coming up pretty soon. And then what are they actually doing on the ground? They're essentially harassing and profiling American citizens, violating their individual civil rights, which creates easy opportunities for lawsuits that should immediately strike down any sort of constitutional legitimacy for maintaining some kind of organization like this. And then we haven't even gotten to the recruitment practices.
Mm.
Yeah, Ebony, they pulling dudes off the street.
Right.
Just pulling dudes off the street.
Mm.
There are more qualified people passing out parking tickets than there are these guys walking around with guns and ice badges.
There are more qualified people passing out wolf tickets than these folks who are walking around and reaping terror in these communities. I mean, I have been absolutely shocked and appalled to see folks who are supposed to be an extension of our federal government, folks who are supposed to uphold a certain standard, folks who are supposed to uphold a level of integrity, right? Last time I checked, under the Constitution of the United States, folks were entitled to due process. Folks were entitled to hearing their Miranda rights read to them. Folks were entitled to equal justice under the law. And what we have seen is a complete reversal of that standard in such a short period of time. If we acquiesce, if we give in to the sense of inevitability that this administration is trying to create, then it may be very hard, if not nearly impossible, for us to turn this thing around.
You know, just to talk about, there was a story that was on, I just found on NBC, that was talking about some of these people that they have been recruiting for ICE, and they was talking about a processing error that caused an artificial intelligence tool that was used by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, resulted in untrained, as we know, or undertrained recruits being placed into field offices. I just want to, while we're talking about this, put DEI at the top. Because don't forget when this president came in office.
Right.
All these DEI statements that he made. And since then, from Hegseth's issue to tweet, I mean, it has been a cluster, you know what, right? And this tool was supposed to identify applicants with prior law enforcement experience and track requiring they only went through like 4 weeks of online training. And that's what law enforcement officials told NBC. And those without experience were supposed to complete, those who had a little bit, but those who had none went through only 8 weeks of experience, took a course in person in Georgia. They took this course. But these have been some of the most unqualified. But on top of that, which is even more sinister that we are seeing and identifying those who who charged in violently into the Capitol, also on these streets.
Listen.
And they're covered up, and they are saying and doing whatever they want to do. This is by design. So as much as we holler they need to be trained, who?
Yeah, you're right.
They don't care about training. This is like a stick up, a robbery in the daytime, a robbery of your democracy, and the lights are on, the sun is out, they are in your face. They wrote a book about it, but some people didn't want to read it. But it is plain back. They didn't stutter. And in fact, when we've seen people like Rubio or Stephen Miller, I don't even say Miller, but other members try to rephrase what the president has said, he goes back every time and says, I said what I said. I'm not rolling back forces. They tried to say that all the reports, they're going to be pulling back out of Minnesota just a little bit. He came back and said, no, I said what I said. We can't soften this or cushion this.
We can't. And we have just a few moments left with Dr. Jonathan E. Collins. This is breaking news, and I'm sure this news has legs, and we're going to continue to follow this. But duty calls, especially daddy duty. We're going to lose him to daycare pickup momentarily. But Dr. Collins, before you go, I wanted to give you sort of a final word of reflection as we are all shaken and stirred by the news of the arrest of Don Lemon and Georgia Ford.
Well, I just think if this doesn't wake us up, I don't know what will. If this doesn't stir our bones, I don't know what will. Look at what is happening right before our eyes. law-abiding American citizens are being profiled, beaten, jailed, killed. Experienced and important journalists who are tasked with telling the story of America, both its beauty and its darkness, are being jailed and harassed. The news has been essentially seeing its legitimacy questioned for years now when a president continues to call it fake. Right? Like, look what is happening now. And look, folks are starting to take to the streets, and we need to see more. We should feel like this moment deserves our full attention. We should feel like this moment requires a level of desperate action, because the story of this moment will be told, and we have a choice right now. Do we want that to be a story of triumph, or do we want it to be a story of failure? Do we want it to be a story of cowardice, or do we want it to be a story where we looked at what could potentially be our greatest challenge and we faced it with strength and with courage and with togetherness and with civility? And we have a choice, and I just hope we make the right one.
I hope we do too. Our thanks to Dr. Jonathan E. Collins, professor of political science at Columbia University, our resident democracy scholar. Of course, you understand why we have him on just about every week to help us make it make sense when it does. Go ahead and go off to daddy duty, and we'll be in touch with you soon.
Thank you.
We are still with Ebony McMorris, my friend and colleague. She is the White House correspondent for AURN. And if you're just joining us, this is a special report of A More Perfect Union, where we've been talking to frontline leaders. We've been talking to Democratic strategists and subject matter experts to really delve into the deeply troubling news we woke up to, learning that former CNN anchor and independent journalist Don Lemon, along with independent journalists and producer and former National Association of Black Journalists chapter president Georgia Fort, have been arrested by federal agents this morning. This is a complete assault on the First Amendment. Look, today it is Georgia Fort and Don Lemon. Tomorrow, it can be any of us. And that is not the kind of country we want to live in. Right, Ebony?
No, on that point, I know we're talking about Minnesota, but look what's happening in Maine. The same attacks are happening in Maine. I mean, Maine's governor, she doesn't play. She is fighting back. But I was in the room. I can remember when the president, I was in the, I believe it was the Roosevelt room when he brought all the governors in for a winter meeting. And the governor of Maine, they literally went back and forth in almost a yelling match because he was coming at her for LGBTQ plus IA issues. And he basically said, if you don't change some of these rules, I'm coming for you. And she basically was like, I'm ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go. I will never forget that. I posted that on my page, and now we're seeing protests in Maine happening right now. As you said earlier before, Nii, that today is a massive, in Maine it's ice out Maine. Same thing is happening in Minnesota, but today is a national day of protest. It is happening there. You had streets, schools, restaurants, companies, small businesses that are shut down in solidarity with what is happening. Community leaders from all over are saying to stay indoors or skip whatever your vocation may be. But in Maine, they're calling it Operation, Trump is calling this Operation Catch of the Day. They're boasting about this. And at the same time, I was reading a report earlier, the ICE is quietly trying to build, they're not doing anything quiet, but building a national mass detention network. And this is in Arizona, buying and converting 23 huge warehouses across the country with the capacity of 80,000 people. detention centers all over in your backyard. They're buying up these properties because they want to begin to house and jail more people. And Trump's DHS is selling this as they're calling it a hub and spoke system, arresting locals and feeding them into these processing hubs for a few weeks. Then they get shipped off into these giant warehouse facilities and they sit and wait for deportation. Sit and wait for deportation. And this is not just those who are immigrants, these are also American citizens that we are seeing. Look at the 5-year-old that we are seeing that is in a deportation center, that's in a facility right now. We just saw Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett go out and have a chance to talk to the gentleman's father and see the baby. And she said he was just sitting there like limpless, lifeless. He wasn't asleep. They're not getting fed. They're not. It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. It is a lot to take in. And we have seen this movie before. We have been warned about this before. What I want to do is share with the folks who are joining our special report, the folks who are joining our live stream here. I want to share something that former Vice President Kamala Harris said August 22nd, 2024. This was before the election. This was a part of her acceptance speech of the Democratic nomination for president. It feels like decades ago, even though it's been, barely a year since Donald Trump's return to office. But her words back then ring true right now. They're actually awfully chilling to hear right now. Take a listen to what then Vice President and Democratic nominee for President Kamala Harris had to say.
Consider what he intends to do if we give him power again. Consider his explicit intent to set free violent extremists who assaulted those law enforcement officers at the Capitol. His explicit intent to jail journalists, political opponents, and anyone he sees as the enemy. His explicit intent to deploy our active duty military against our own citizens. Consider the power he will have, especially after the United States Supreme Court just ruled that he would be immune from criminal prosecution. Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails and how he would use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States, not to improve your life, not to strengthen our national security, but to serve the only client he has ever had, himself. And we know what a second Trump term would look like. It's all laid out in Project 2025, written by his closest advisors. And its sum total is to pull our country back to the past. But America, we are not going back. We are not going back.
So we thought that we weren't going back, and it feels like the hands of time have in fact been moved back. If you're just joining us, this is a special report of A More Perfect Union. We are typically off air on Fridays, but the occasion dictates that we go live, and thank God for the technology that allows us to be able to do that. I'm joined with Ebony McMorris, White House correspondent for AURN, and we've been fielding a number of leaders from the front lines, subject matter experts this morning to help unpack what is happening in real time in this country, what it means for former CNN anchor and independent journalist Don Lemon, along with Georgia Fort, another independent journalist and producer who were arrested by the U.S. Department of Justice on some funky charges that a federal
Some
judge had.
racist charges, some KKK. I mean, they had to reach back in their tool bag of racism to find, and this isn't the first time that they've done that. This isn't the first time that they have pulled or back or tried to issue charges. And I was just trying to go through some of my notes before, and they have used something from either civil rights or something from, I mean, from Dred Scott decision to everything. And so I know everyone is saying don't be alarmed. We are going to all be affected. As much as we all, even as journalists, know and see and read and saw the writing on the wall, you cannot help but be affected, right? You cannot help to be alarmed, but also I think, Nee, you and I have had conversations many times offline about how, even though we're at different networks, about what does it look like for Black press coming together even more. And for those who may think, well, where's everybody? Where's the Black press? Sometimes I have to say, well, where are you? What are you looking for? I'm not here to slander mainstream media, but I'm saying, but also there needs to be a support behind independent journalists, behind Black press, because part of the reason why you do see some shrink is because of funding. Just be honest about it. It takes not just you getting up here and using your voice, but there's a whole machine behind that. Same thing when it comes to whether it be Georgia Ford or Don Lemon, or going back to the civil rights movement, right? You talk about how that movement was funded, how people had to really pull together resources and support. I don't care if it wasn't with your dollars, it could be you just cooking and helping and making sure. So when you go to the website, Stand With Minnesota, there are ways to support by just feeding people who are being arrested. Who've been arrested, looking after their family. I mean, there's so many different ways, and so this is a collective fight that we have to see. We talk about what the end of democracy could look like. We are in the middle. I went down those 9 stages of what it looks like when authoritarianism begins to rise up, and baby, we at step 9. But Nee, how is it for you? I mean, you're back and forth between DC and LA. And we saw what was happening in LA as well. And we saw how even some of the news spun it, right? What is it like from your perspective?
Well, I can tell you that it's like toggling between two very different worlds. Washington, D.C. being our nation's capital, and Los Angeles being one of the creative capitals of the world, if not the creative capital of the world. So, you see power and influence exercised differently. Here in Los Angeles, you see it exercised in such a way that really sort of shapes culture. It informs the zeitgeist. It is about making things cool and really doing the work of softening hearts and minds so that they may be open enough to see things differently and consider things differently. And so I'm very fortunate that I get a chance to toggle back and forth. I'm very fortunate that I get to, sit beside you and join you in the White House briefing room and to speak truth to power, but also that I get to be close to community as well. And I get to be close to the people who are shaping the culture as well. It's a very unique vantage point I don't take for granted. But, let me just say that it also hits close to home because I'm in the nation's capital doing the work, or here in the creative capital of LA doing the work, and everywhere in between. It's that First Amendment that makes my life and career possible. It's what makes it possible for us to be able to speak truth to power. And we don't have to worry about, or we shouldn't have to worry about, getting that knock at the door in the early morning hours. And that experience that Georgia Fort had this morning that experience that Don Lemon had here in Los Angeles while covering the Grammys is not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to happen. It has happened, and it will keep happening unless we push back, and we push back hard, unless we lock arms, unless we are communicating directly to what I think of as the silent majority. The silent majority out there. You know, there are a lot of folks out there that don't necessarily reach for a picket sign, that don't necessarily make it easy to sign a petition. You know, there are plenty of folks out there that, you know, don't engage in our democracy in that way. And you know what we want to do, what we want to make sure that we do. One of the takeaways that we want folks to walk away with from this call is that they're attacking every single one of our Bill of Rights, every single personal and collective freedom that we are guaranteed. It is not subtle anymore. It is happening. It's not happening behind the scenes. This is a blatant attack on our First Amendment today by arresting Don Lemon for doing nothing after a federal judge told them not to do it. After Fox News violated every journalistic oath every minute they were on air to go after someone for just covering the news, right? And so this means that we got to speak out, even if we've never spoken out. This means, as Rashad Robinson, the former president of Color of Change, and a civil rights leader that I've known for many years, as he says so eloquently, that this means challenging people in your life whom you know should speak out as well. Anyone at a corporation, anyone in the media, any elected official, any Trump voter in your life, any church that you're a part of that is staying silent and not representing your beliefs in this moment by speaking out, it's on all of us to say, not on my watch. Not on my watch are we going to allow folks to be silent about this.
I think in addition to that, I'm glad because I'm texting right now. We're supposed to be getting up Cliff Albright with Black Voters Matter to talk about what this moment we should be expecting him any moment to chime in. Let me just make sure he's good.
Yeah, and you should know that we're also expecting Kenya Parham. She's the chief growth officer over at Spill, the Spill app. It's no secret that TikTok is now in the hands of U.S. ownership. And that means the terms of service have changed. It means that the community guidelines have changed. And there are a lot of people that are voting with their fingers and their feet by leaving the platform. They're leaving the TikTok platform, and they're actually exploring life on other platforms, including the Spill app. The Spill app has had an explosion in growth over the past a few weeks. And so Kenya is going to join us to talk about that. She's also going to be talking about how folks on the Spill app are responding this morning to reports of former CNN anchor and independent journalist Don Lemon, and independent journalist and producer Georgia Fort being arrested by the Department of Justice.
I'm going to keep going back to voting because that's what this is about. This is about them stealing this election. And we saw Senate Democrats earlier send out a note urging the Department of Justice to stop intensifying, they said, and stop intensifying pressure campaign to coerce states into handing over their voter rolls. They wrote, "We strongly oppose the department's lawsuits against states which are unauthorized attempts to centralize this data. That in addition to posing serious risks to voter privacy, data security, and national security, also invite unwarranted voter roll purges and undermine state and local election officials." This letter was sent over by Senator Alex Padilla, who we saw, who was also himself accosted, I'll say, at a press conference held by Secretary Noem earlier in the year. It was signed by 26 Democrats and some independent senators who are states that represent where the DOJ has been suing them. We've had many states that did, thank God, reject those reject those demands to turn over the voter list, like states like Oregon, and California and places like that. But we need more states. We need more states to stand up and to do what's right. We've seen them gerrymander. I mean, it is a day that some people thought wasn't gonna happen or couldn't happen, or thought that we had laws and guardrails in place. But when you have a Supreme Court that does the bidding of its master, the president, this is what happens.
Mm-hmm.
That was the difference between his first administration. Although we saw some crazy stuff happen there, he did have some pushback. He did have some pushback. But here, this is a president who has no guardrails.
It's a president that has no guardrails, and it's also a Congress that is missing in action. Look, on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, we're not seeing very many profiles in courage. As we mentioned earlier in this special report, when we were in conversation with Dr. Jonathan E. Collins, professor of political science at Columbia University, also a resident democracy scholar here on A More Perfect Union. Just as we mentioned to him, there are a lot of folks that are disappointed, particularly in the Senate Democrats, who have seemed to strike a deal with Republicans to, in my view, kick the can down the road for another 2 weeks on the question of funding to the Department of Homeland Security, which, as we know, funds ICE. We know that the Senate Democrats are willing to negotiate with Senate Republicans over some guardrails for ICE, changes to the tactics and strategies that they employ to achieve their mission. What I'm hearing from people out in community, from people in the field, shut it down. How many people need to get shot in the head? You know, before we recognize that, you know, they ain't interested in de-escalation.
They're not. And I just got people just saying, I saw you on, I want to join. Give me 1 second. Let me send the link right now. Alfonso David with Global Black Economic Forum. I'm telling him to come on.
Oh, you telling him to come on right now?
Yeah, you can put him in the back room if you want. Can you? You want to hold him?
Yeah, can we hold him for a little bit? Because we're well, there he is. There he is.
Oh, let's see.
Alfonso David is joining us. There he is. Alfonso David is the president of the Global Black Economic Forum. He is no stranger to A More Perfect Union. This is our special report in light of the arrest of former CNN anchor and independent journalist Don Lemon, as well as Georgia Fort, also an independent journalist and producer, former National Association of Black Journalists chapter president, right? And so let me just be very clear. These are seasoned journalists. They know what they're doing. They know the protocol, and they still got the knock at the door. Alfonso, how are you responding to this devastating news? I know that you're also friends, as we are, with Don Lemon.
Yes, I think everyone out there should understand one very simple principle. This is about you. This is not about journalism. This is not about reporting about what's happening in a church. This is about your basic civil liberties. And we all have protections under the First Amendment, right? We often talk about the freedom of association, the freedom of assembly, the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press. It's all within that amendment. And when the government can silence a reporter from exercising their First Amendment rights, all of our First Amendment rights are then under threat. So don't be mistaken into thinking that this is about what was happening in a church.
Huh.
This is about whether we have a voice and will continue to have a voice. This is about whether you will be sanctioned for posting something on social media. This is about whether or not you can go and protest at a march. If government is allowed to silence reporters from effectively doing their jobs, what makes you think that they can't silence you for being a citizen?
Huh.
That's right.
And I think it's important for us in this moment to be clear. You may or may not know Don Lemon. I know him personally. Georgia Fort is another reporter. I don't know her personally, but I'm just as enraged because she was doing her job. As a lawyer, if I'm performing a function for a client and I'm then arrested for doing that, whether it be representing someone in immigration court or filing papers for a client legally, then we've all lost our rights under a democracy. Then these words in the Constitution mean absolutely nothing.
Wow. I guess, you know, we're all, I mean, what you said was great. And as an attorney, Alfonso, I don't know if you saw the charges, the FACE Act and the KKK act that they're trying to use in this case. I said they had to reach in the bag of racism to figure this one out.
Yeah, that's an overreach if I've ever seen one, right? You can't essentially say that reporters are required or restricted from covering news events. The last time I looked at the First Amendment, and the last time I looked at how reporters have been historically functioning in this country, they have had the ability and, in fact, the freedom to cover public events. This was a public event. And if they can no longer do that, we're all in trouble.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. What is your message out there to what I've referred to all this morning as the silent majority out there? People that, you know, don't go to protest. They don't pick up picket signs. You know, they are, you know, reluctant to sign petitions, but they care. What's your message to that silent majority out there today in light of this morning's deeply disturbing news?
I would say to the silent majority, your silence will not protect you. Your silence will not protect you. And this is not conjecture. This is not speculation. We know this. We've seen this movie before. It's just been in other countries.
Ooh, that
We've
part.
also seen this movie before, just many of us were not alive. We're talking about Jim Crow. We're talking about slavery. We're talking about, you can pick the country where a dictatorship came in.
Yep.
Basically stripped away the rights of the citizens.
Yeah. Yeah.
So staying at home and being silent and just watching other people take action, I understand you may feel safe, but that safety is illusory. It's not real. And what we're seeing right now is Alex Preddy got killed. And we're seeing people now having this conversation that we're not having this conversation when Michael Brown got killed.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same issue.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, our thanks to Alfonso David for joining us. He's the president of the Global Black Economic Forum, and he always has an opportunity to come back with us anytime. He is one of those leaders on the front line, civil rights leaders. He ain't new to this. He's true to this. And we thank you for your work and your witness.
Thank you,
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're listening to our special report. This is our special report of A More Perfect Union. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai and joined with my friend and colleague, Ebony McMorris, the White House correspondent for AURN. We're talking to a number of leaders on the front lines about the deeply disturbing report of former CNN anchor and independent journalist Don Lemon, as well as independent journalist and producer Georgia Fort being arrested by federal agents this morning. I'm told that Don Lemon actually spent the night in jail. Here to weigh in on the news of the day, I want to invite Nadine Smith, who is the new president of colorofchange.org. Nadine, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been quite a day, and I'm glad you decided to do a special report, because this is a red line that has been crossed, and it's a familiar one with echoes in history that really deserves to cause us all to sound the alarm.
Yeah. Ebony?
I know you all just put out a statement regarding this incident. Incident, that is such a disrespectful word. Regarding this violent,
yes.
Right, this violent, horrific attack that we are seeing all over. Talk about also especially for organizations that are in this fight. What is next in this?
Well, the thing that I want people to understand what is happening and why it's happening, and to really understand why they decided at night to find the most intimidating and humiliating way to come after Black journalists. To arrest Don Lemon as he was reporting on the Grammys, to go to Georgia Fort's house. If you haven't seen the live stream video, it is really quite chilling. You see these masked armed guards outside her door. You see one peering through her window. And in the video, you can hear her children crying in the background as she's taken away. And so we sent out a press release, but we're also calling on the millions of Color of Change supporters, and in fact, all Americans who believe in free speech and don't support government censorship, to demand not only the immediate release and the dismissal of these charges, but a full investigation into the circumstances, because this is not only government censorship, it is retaliation. And for me, it's very personal. My first career was as a reporter. I was a radio reporter for the National Public Radio affiliate, and then I worked for a major newspaper. And I came into journalism precisely because journalists are willing to take on the powerful. They're willing to ask the questions that are required to protect everyday people from corruption and government abuse. And so history shows us what happens when those in power seek to silence Black journalists. We have seen Black newspapers burned to the ground, editors threatened, killed, driven into exile. Ida B. Wells had her newsroom destroyed for exposing lynching. Black publications that challenge state violence and white supremacy were shut down. They were surveilled. They were crushed. And, this country has repeatedly tried to silence Black truth tellers. So for us, this is a moment where we have to use every lever of power. That means everyday people speaking up. Faith voices have to speak. The same people that ask for our vote have to show backbone in this moment. The corporations that ask us for our money have to actually, speak with some to demonstrate their values and not remain silent. So this is about more than two journalists. It's even bigger than journalism. It's about whether truth is allowed to exist. And they are sending us this message to every person in America, especially Black journalists: shut up, be silent, or you could be next. And our answer is very clear. We are not terrified. We are outraged. We are resolved, and we will never be silenced.
We will never be silenced. And speaking of never being silenced, we're now joined by the president of Human Rights Campaign, Kelly Robinson. Talk about civil rights leaders that are on the front lines of change. We've spoken to a number of folks this morning, and we really appreciate Nadine Smith, the new president of Color of Change, joining us, a former journalist, someone who is also not new to this, but true to this. Kelly Robinson, where were you this morning when you heard about the arrest of Don Lemon and Georgia Fort, and what's your reaction?
Well, funny enough, I was on a plane on my way to Texas to continue fighting and working with the people of Texas to fight back against all the obstruction of our civil liberties and the rolling back of LGBTQ plus rights here. And my phone starts blowing up. Breaking news, the same way we enter every day with a new atrocity. And the thing that gets me is, look, they are ripping apart our Bill of Rights. All of these people that talked about how they love this Constitution are tearing it to shreds. The 14th Amendment is how he came out the gate. The 4th Amendment, breaking into people's houses that they're doing in Minnesota. The 2nd Amendment, they won't even stand by that in the wake of Alex Preddy. And now they're coming once again for our First Amendment rights. We got to be clear what is happening here. It's not an assault on some of us. It is an assault on all of us. And I want to underscore what Nadine said. It is oftentimes the people that are at the margins are at the front of this fight, fighting for everybody. And I think one of the things I'm holding close, especially being the president of the Human Rights Campaign, is how queer and trans people are once again at the forefront of this fight. Renee Good was a queer woman and was murdered at the hands of the state. Don Lemon, a Black queer man, has been put in jail for doing his job as a journalist. We got to be clear about what's happening here. And if folks aren't awake now, you better wake up, because we have work to do.
We have work to do, and we appreciate you taking the time as folks who are doing that work. Ebony,
I love what you were talking about, Kelly, and especially Nadine, that we've got to realize that this is way more than journalists. This is way more than this is today's headlines. But tomorrow, later on today, we were talking about what's happening in Maine, what they're beefing up in Chicago and other places. And so I do also, while you ladies are on here, want to encourage people to, if you're trying to figure out what to do, then you need to also look to see what organizations are in your backyard that are doing the work. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but there are people whose hands have been on the plow for quite some time and that can fill you in and tell you how to activate your communities. This is so about upward movement. And this is the only way anything in our country, especially for the rights of Black folk, have ever been able to get done, is because we pushed and we pressed. And yes, I mourn the lives of those whose blood has been shed. But in order for that not to be in vain, then we all have to do our part. And no, you don't have to be the loud one on the front line. But like I said before, you could be the one that's saying, here's some money to put in your pocket. Let me see if I check on your neighbor to see if there is a plan in place for what happens in our community. When I look at Minnesota, they had whistles to let people know, hey, they're coming through. I don't care what it is that we have to develop, but communities have to begin to look inward for this one. It's the only way that we're going to and have been able to ever make it through.
Yeah. I know, Kelly, speaking of making it through, we would be remiss if we had two very distinguished civil rights leaders, national leaders, dare I say global leaders, on this platform and not ask for a call to action. In fact, we know today is supposed to be a national day of action. And if Don Lemon's arrest and Georgia Fort's arrest, among others, if this does not signal a call to action, then you're not paying attention. Kelly, what's our call to action today?
Look, do not be silent, and don't be disheartened either. Like Ebony was saying, people are rising up. You got folks in Minnesota that are turning out in negative 20-degree weather to fight for not just their rights, but all of us. And I want to let folks know, if you're in the LA area today at 1 p.m. local time, folks are going to be turning out to 255 East Temple. That's a federal courthouse, because that's when Don Lemon is supposed to have his first hearing. Show up, show them that we are paying attention and watching. And if you're not in LA, don't be silent. Post on social media, put a lemon up, let the world know that we are paying attention and we are not going to let our rights be ripped away in the dark of the night.
Again, for our leaders, learners, and listeners that maybe didn't catch it, folks in Los Angeles can go where, at what time today?
1 p.m. local time at 255 East Temple in LA. That's a federal courthouse. Don Lemon's going to have his hearing at that time, and we want the world to know that we're watching. That's 255 East Temple in LA at 1 p.m. local time. Come on, show up and be a part of the community.
Well, thank you so much for that call to action. Thank you for everything that you do. We know everybody is just going about their day, and you've made time to share with us. And so thank you for joining us, Kelly. And Nadine, I want to ask you, from Color of Change, what is our call to action from your vantage point? We can do more than one thing.
Oh, absolutely. And not only can we have to. I want to point everybody to the fact that they have changed the orders to ICE in Minneapolis. They've said, do not engage with protesters and only target people with criminal records. This is a new directive. And the reason I want to underscore that is because two things. One, it tells us the power of people. Most folks aren't going to get to Los Angeles, but you can absolutely raise your voice. You can absolutely show out online. You know, Color of Change is the largest online racial justice organization. We reach millions of people, but we turn that online action into on the ground action as well. And the reason I'm drawing attention to Minneapolis is one, it tells us the power of the people, but it also tells us that this was never about immigration enforcement. It was always about trauma, terrorizing, intimidating, and extorting. Just hours after Alex Preddy was killed, Pam Bondi basically said, you do these things we want you to do, and we'll end the chaos. Yep. This is how this government functions, not as a government, but as mobsters. And this act, they always want to flood the zone. They always want to leave us terrorized and traumatized. So one thing you can do right now is not be afraid, create community, look to each other. I guarantee there's mutual aid work happening in your community in preparation for when these ICE raids come. And I just want to shout out the National Association of Black Journalists who are going through it right now, because they have seen very clearly that the target is on their back. So yeah, don't be silent. Don't be afraid. We're going to get through this. And the only way through it is together.
The only way through it is together. Our thanks to Nadine Smith, the president of Color of Change, for joining us. Kelly Robinson, any final thoughts before we let you go?
We got work to do, but this is a moment for us to build the democracy that's always been by and for the people, one that is built in our image. So yes, I know that the things are hard right now, but we got to channel the courage of our ancestors in this moment to be the builders of tomorrow. And like Nadine said, things are rough, but when people show up, the power of the people always wins. That's why you got Greg Bovino kicked out of Minnesota. That's why we've been able to fight back against redistricting, all racist gerrymandering, let's call it what it is, disguised as redistricting all across this country. That's why our voices will be the thing that saves this democracy and actually rebuilds it even stronger for all of us. So y'all, in moments like this, I know that it's easy to want to hide, but I'm asking you to show up for your community. And when you are there, the courage that we find together, the courage we find in our community will be the thing that saves us.
Our thanks to Kelly Robinson, the president of Human Rights Campaign, and Nadine Smith, the president of Color of Change. Please come back again soon.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
y'all.
Take care.
You are listening to our special report of A More Perfect Union. We have been going for almost 2 hours now. I woke up at 4:30 this morning, as so many of us did, to text messages and emails and phone calls from colleagues and friends and activists across the country, shaken and disturbed by the arrest of Don Lemon and Georgia Fort by the U.S. Department of Justice. I am joined here with Ebony McMorris. Ebony is the White House correspondent for AURN, and we've been going strong, and we've been assembling the Avengers.
we have. So we look aside, it's because someone's texting. We're like, okay, are you coming on, or are you not coming on? But it is, woo! You know what? I'm gonna say less because it's fire that's about to come. I'm going to let you go ahead and do the intros, Nee, on this one.
Well, let me just say it is an honor to be in conversation with these Avengers.
Yes.
I'm talking about Kenya Parham, who's the Chief Growth Officer over at Spill. If you haven't heard, let me just tell you that with TikTok now in the hands of U.S. ownership, there are a number of TikTokers that have been reading those terms of service and reading those community guidelines really closely. And they said, this is a bridge too far. We ain't doing this. And so guess what? They're looking for a new home. And a lot of folks have found a home on the Spill app. an app that is intentional. They are deliberate in every which way in terms of creating a platform where we can feel and be safe and be in community. Welcome to the show, Kenya Parham, and then Cliff Albright, who is with Black Voters Matter. Cliff is also not new to this, but true to this, fighting for democracy, not just during election cycles or on election day, but every day. Cliff and Kenya, thank you for joining this special report.
Thank you for having me, having us, for doing this. Incredibly humbled to share this moment in time with you all, and just feeling more affirmed than ever about this is why we never stopped building, right?
Yeah.
This is why we understood deeply the exogenous factors that have contributed to the moments like this. They are not new. They have been coming for a long time. And this is exactly why we at Spill started building in 2023 when we did.
Yeah, and it's also part of the reason why Spill at the moment is number 17 on the App Store charts. It's because people are picking up what you're putting down. Cliff Albright, what's your reaction to this news this morning? News of Don Lemon and Georgia Fort being arrested by the U.S. Department of Justice. They heard that knock on the door that we as journalists and as activists, as leaders on the front line dread. What's your reaction to what happened this morning?
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. And hey, Ebony, it's my reaction is just like everybody else's, right? Anger, frustration, maybe even throw in a little bit of fear, if I'm to be honest, right? Because they come knocking at Don's door or Georgia Fort's door, then it's only a matter of time before they come knocking on Ebony's door, knocking on my door, right? Knocking on your door. And so all of that is what I'm feeling. But at the end of the day, going back to what Kelly was talking about, right? Going back to what Kenya's been saying, at the end of the day, recognizing that we've got power. At the end of the day, recognizing that they're doing this because they fear our power, right? I mean, think about it. They are now demonstrating that they will, if you are recording and documenting and telling the stories about what they are doing, then you might get a knock at your door. You might get shot, right? You might get something else done to you. They don't want the stories told because at the end of the day, they know, one, that their story is an unpopular story, and that two, there's more of us than them. And that's why they're doing this. And in particular, coming after Black journalists, because what they definitely don't want is that Black journalists tell this story and that folks like us, like those in our community who maybe up until this point haven't necessarily been that engaged. Maybe, we're part of the crew, however big it is, that's saying the stuff like, oh, this ain't our business. This isn't about us, right? We did what we were supposed to do back in November. They definitely don't want Black journalists telling this story to a Black audience because then we get more involved. And they can't handle that because what we know is, what the history of this country shows is when we get involved, stuff changes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to, before Nadine left off, she said something that I always keep in mind. She quoted actually Trump strategist Steve Bannon during an interview in 2018, where he said in order to get Democrats off and to overwhelm media opposition, he used the term flood the zone. And I always keep that in mind. We've got to flood the zone, and that is to keep us off track. But Cliff, I wanted to ask you really quickly and then go to you, Kenya. Cliff, connect, because I keep saying this also goes back to our vote. What we saw in Fulton County, with them raiding Fulton County, taking 700 boxes, from taking ballots and voting information. And we talked earlier about the letter that Pam Bondi sent saying, we'll pull back if you give us your voter rolls. So there's a lot at stake here. While we are upset and angry and grieving, they are literally trying to take the vote right from under you.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, what we saw happen in Fulton County, and as you said, it's all connected, right? It's all connected. At the end of the day, it goes back. It's all about power. It's about anti-Blackness, yes, but it's also about power. And if there's any of us that think that this election in 2026, not to mention 2028, But
Yeah.
even 2026, that these are just going to be normal elections, then we are sadly mistaken. And so what we are having to do, us at Black Voters Matter and a lot of organizations, is we're trying to hold these two things, these two thoughts at the same time. That on the one hand, that these upcoming elections are critically important, right? That we've got to participate. That, if we don't get control of this Congress back, this Congress that is letting this regime, not administration, it's a regime, right? We talk about Iran as a regime, we talk about China or North Korea as a regime. This is a regime. And if we don't get a Congress that's going to rein them in, right?
Yeah.
If we let them get away with the gerrymandering, then they will entrench themselves. So we've got to send that message, but we've also got to send this message, right? That the elections will not be enough. That we're not just going to vote our way out of this. It's got to be both and. It's got to be the elections, but it's also got to be us documenting them and watching them and doing protests and even doing protests in different kinds of ways, right? Disrupting, right? We've got to find ways to do both of those things. They are both critically important. And yes, the Fulton County is just further evidence that, this isn't about them going out and finding fraud in 2020. Right? Those votes have been counted. Those votes have been counted probably more than any other votes in any other election. Counted once by machine, counted twice by machine, counted once by hands, and still never, and counted by them. Counted by Republican officials half the time, and never found anything to be wrong. This isn't about 2020. This is about them finding an excuse to try to take over Fulton County, to try to take over voter information, try to purge voters so that they can entrench themselves in 26 and beyond.
Kenya, I want to ask you a question because Cliff was talking about messaging and what our messaging may be, and you were talking about that because we have seen across social media platforms, our Black content creators, our messages diminished, and we have seen an incredible rise of the extreme right, of MAGA, and this administration has doubled down and retweeted and put out their message while diminishing our message. To talk about how we continue to get that out. That's why I'm glad about platforms like you. We've got to lean on the things that we also create in our own community.
1,000%. Let's take a 30,000 foot view here just for a second, because everything that's happening from the sale of TikTok to, raids on state election offices by federal officials. I just want to say that because a lot of people don't understand that the federal government doesn't need your voter rolls and your voter ballots. Those are, under state jurisdiction, right? To, all of the coordinated, antitrust measures that have been going on across platforms, to the prolific spread of misinformation and disinformation that systematically targets our communities. These things are all happening in tandem at the same time. Cliff, to your point, not just because we have power, but because we're effective. Right. And I need people to understand that, right? When we organize, when we mobilize, when we, use our, long cultural, chains of communication, right? When we spread the word within our communities, when we mobilize, we are effective, right? What we're learning right now in the rise of independent journalism, in the rise of virality and content creators, is that there's this interesting ecosystem brewing that mainstream media is trying to catch up with, which is that creators from a internet social media perspective are the new cultural editors, right? And they are just as critical to truth telling as journalists are. And when you have journalists who are independent, right, being content creators themselves, now you've got a really interesting, like a Don Lemon, right, like a Georgia Fort, right, folks who will immediately broadcast to their networks to make sure they're hearing from them. Now you've got a really interesting mix, right, where you've got one content creator who went viral, right, and another journalist who went to J school, right, and now you're pairing those two together. Journalists bring the rigor creators bring the reach, and that magic happens when the two are combined, right? When we use those together, we can develop a rhythm to correct the record and shape public memory, which is the significance of what is happening right now, right? What worries me is that what we're seeing across other platforms, not Spill, but other platforms, is that we're training a generation to believe that engagement equals truth.
Oh,
Come on
right?
now. Tell the people, Kenya, because they got it twisted out there. Tell the people.
We're training these other platforms, right? By introducing vanity metrics, by changing what you see, by introducing endless scrolling, right? By manipulating algorithms to operate against you based on the cultural intelligence that you so freely gave to that same platform. They're training generations of us to believe that engagement equals truth. And if we don't intervene right now, we're going to lose more than information. We're going to lose memory. And that's what I was talking about the collaboration between creators and journalists at this time in shaping public memory. You know, the Spill platform since early this morning has just been surging with thoughts, conversation about not just Don and Georgia. Don is a Spillionaire on platform. He participates in community trends. He plays spades on the platform. He and I actually shared in conversation at the National Press Club early last year, talking about the importance of independent journalism in media and platform responsibility at a time like this. And that was broadcast directly to the Spill app. But they've also been making sure that people understand that this is not just Don and not just Georgia. This is also Traherne Cruz and Jamel Lundy as well, too, right? Two activists who were also taken into custody. And so, you know, I'm here not just on behalf of, you know, myself as the only Black woman leading a major social platform in the world, right? But I'm also here speaking on behalf of a community that is actively using the tools that we are building to elevate and share information amongst themselves, and also ask some really necessary questions about what they want to do, how they're going to mobilize, how they're going to stay informed, and also how they're going to stay motivated, because being consumed by news like this, starting your day off like this, can really impact the rest of your experience. And what I do know to be true is that we've still got to stay motivated. We've still got to stay positive and joyful, and know that we are just as effective as we were yesterday, right? Keep that hope inside of our hearts and our minds.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that word, Kenya. In our remaining minutes, we've been live for over 2 hours because we saw fit to provide a service to our audiences, to our community. This is deeply disturbing stuff. And, you know, the administration, the powers that be, in my view, they want to create a sense of inevitability. They want us to think that it's got to be this way. But we know better. We know that it doesn't have to be this way, that in fact, it shouldn't be this way. And so in our remaining minutes, Cliff, I want to give you an opportunity to offer us a call to action. Today it's a national day of action. And what has taken place in terms of the arrest of Don in Georgia, if anything, it should strengthen our resolve. But tell the people what our call to action is today, tomorrow, and moving forward as we defend the rights that belong to us. This should not be a question. These rights belong to us, and we have a government that is trying to snatch them away.
Yep. I'm gonna give a couple, maybe 2 or 3, and I'm gonna start with the easiest, right? The low-hanging fruit, which is call your senators, call elected officials, especially senators right now, because they're making some decisions around whether or not ICE gets any more money, right? And I want to be clear, they need to vote no to that, but that's not enough. They need to be abolished. They need to be completely defunded. I'm not afraid to say it. Some of these electeds might be afraid to say it, but I'm not afraid. They need to be abolished. You can't reform what it is that they're doing. So we need to be calling our senators at a minimum, telling no more extra money ideally that we need to abolish ICE, right? And if you need information, you could go to our socials, Black Voters MTR, Black Voters MTR on all socials. Soon to be Spill as well, so we're gonna get on that. So I thank y'all for informing me on that. But get connected. If not us, get connected to an organization, some organization, right, that you trust, right, that your friends and family trust, but get connected to an organization. Secondly, show up. And there's lots of ways that people can show up. I want to repeat what Kelly said, or just remind folks of what Kelly said about the details. I don't have the location and time in front of me, but hopefully y'all have it and y'all can put it up for the court appearance. And for all of them, for Don, as well as for Georgia, and for the other activists, the Black Lives Matter activists that were also scooped up last night and this morning, right? But show up at those. It means something. Believe me, when folks show up to these courthouses, it means something. So show up to that. But also we got to show up more broadly. Like today was actually, it was called for another general strike. Had the huge general strike last week that was hugely effective, right? Dozens of thousands of people in the streets of Minneapolis and St. Paul and across Minnesota. Today was supposed to be another one. I haven't seen yet whether or not it's spread to other cities effectively. But that's a tactic that we are going to have to do, because at the end of the day, again, the elections are critically important. They will not be enough. So we need folks to show up at some of these other actions, or to not show up, right? Because part of a general strike is you don't show up at work, you don't show up at school, you don't do online transactions, right? And so there are safer ways. We know that when Black folks show up, things tend to get escalated with law enforcement, but there are safer ways for folks to get involved that still want to help disrupt, that still want to help to be ungovernable, right? But don't necessarily want to show up on the front lines. But at the end of the day, it's going to take all of these tactics. There is something for you to do. If you are listening right now, you may not be the speaker, right? But you may be the artist. You may be the tech person that comes up with the best platform for us to help organize. You might be the person that cooks the food for the mass meeting, right? Everybody has a role to play in this. So if you are listening, the challenge is to find out what's your role going to be, and then to go out and make it happen.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Kenya, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to leave us with before Ebony closes this out?
I do. I need everybody to listen up real quick, right? Disinformation, misinformation, malinformation does not always look like a headline or breaking news, right? Sometimes it looks like a meme or a shady caption or a viral joke. Case in point, the official White House account just posted an image not too long ago of Don Lemon with a caption that is actively trying to shape and in a harmful way, that's what we call malinformation, the situation that happened, the protest that happened in Minneapolis at the church as a riot, right? It was not a riot, right? So it's important, right, that we understand that social platforms like Spill are not just a social app, they're cultural infrastructure, okay? And so, platform accountability can't be optional at this time. We're in an era where tech really has to borrow a page from journalism, verify first and amplify later. And every single individual should have should share in that responsibility as well too. If you're using platforms that are, historical platforms that have been around for some time, that have, completely negated their responsibility to upholding their community guidelines and are systematically targeting you with misinformation, malinformation, disinformation, make sure that you are verifying first and amplifying later. Because, these other platforms as we know it have changed forever. We all have a choice in hand. Do we want to sit in the ashes of what is, or do we want to come and build what is next, right? And what is next is Spill. So I want to encourage everybody to join Spill. You can download us from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. I look forward to seeing everybody on platform as we continue to build the future of what safe, joyful, social looks like.
Yes.
Ebony?
They said so much, and I want to echo all of that, because I'll just end with this. You've got your directives, you've got your marching orders, because history's not going to just ask what Trump did. It's not going to just reflect what Bondi did, what Noam did. It's going to reflect what you did in this hour, what the rest of us allowed in this hour. And the test is whether we'll be intimidated into silence. And this is not easy. Cliff said, look, I got a little bit of fear too. So do I. But we have to keep making this country, this Constitution, live up to something, right? And not allow the powers that be tear it down, be defenders of press. I want to encourage people, record, do something, check on your neighborhood, be in community, because Minneapolis is like a warning. It's like a warning. And so, like, King, we've got that knock on the door at midnight. It is here. How are you going to answer it as they build warehouses, detention centers, and different facilities, disappear people, and then try to hijack the language? We've got to make sure that we're watchmen during this time.
And doing it with your money. Doing it with your money.
Yes.
And so, our thanks to Cliff Albright. He is the co-founder of Black Voters Matter, an organization that is fighting above its weight class in this environment. They understand that it's about more than any one election. It is the work that we do in between election cycles. It is the work that prevents people from exercising their right in the first place. They are about that life. Also, our thanks to Kenya Parham, the Chief Growth Officer over at the Spill app. You heard me mention earlier, it's already trending at number 17 on the App Store
chart. Let me
chart.
Go on, because I'm
right.
Thank you.
We're
the only Black-owned app to. You have been on Spill since the very beginning. We're the only Black-owned app to ever be number one in the Apple App Store. We did it in July of 2023. We want to do it again, right? The truth deserves an algorithm. We need tech that uplifts verified, community grounded voices like Don, right? Like all of the journalists at the National Black Journalists Association, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, right? We need tech that uplifts community grounded voices. Spill is exactly that platform. Thank you, Nii-Quartelai. Thank you, Ebony.
And thanks to all of you for joining us. This has been a special report of A More Perfect Union in collaboration with AURN. My thanks to Ebony McMorris, my friend and colleague, our White House correspondent, to Cliff Albright over at Black Voters Matter, and Kenya and the team over at Spill. We'll continue to keep you abreast of how this story develops. I'm going to be at the courthouse this afternoon here in Los Angeles, supporting our friend and brother, Don Lemon, and Sister Georgia Fort, and too many out there who have toiled too long and hard for us to turn around now. You've been listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk Radio and AURN Radio. We'll see you soon.